Hi, everybody. Rick DiClemente. Welcome aboard with Astrology Unplugged. Looking forward to tonight for so many reasons. Um, I got to thinking recently about what it's like for you guys being viewers and listening to an astrologer. And I got to thinking where that can be kind of frustrating if you're not following your own chart. And as John told me recently in a letter that he wrote to me, you got to get your chart done. You just have to get your chart done. A good chart reading is worth thousands in your life. Maybe one or more, but it really is. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn. An accurate reading is worth thousands because you have all these dynamics in your life. You don't know about them. You're operating blindly. So what tonight is, I'm going to try to I'm using Susan A as my volunteer chart because I knew she wouldn't mind as a sample chart. And I'm going to be showing what I would do if I were Susan A, what I would do if I were a normal viewer that's not got a lot of astrological knowledge, and how to motor forth, how to pull that map out from underneath your seat that's got your course on it, what it has, what it doesn't have, how to do it. Because if it looks easy when I'm doing it, it's not easy when you're doing it because it takes time to learn. So that's the story of tonight. And I do want to mention a couple other things. Kathy Pagano will be our guest next week, next Thursday. She is from Rhode Island. She's a very good astrologer. She writes a really good full moon newsletter every week, every month. She's an absolute expert on dreams. She's an absolute Jungian expert. She went to Jung school in Europe. So if you want to take a dream and look at it the way Jung did, which was phenomenal, because Jung didn't tell you what it was sort of like. He told you what it meant, period. She's very good at that, and she will be with us next week to talk about our favorite subject, which is not astrology, but it is the rise again of the divine feminine. She's been on before a long time ago. She's an absolute expert with Eris and the divine feminine rising again. And what does that mean? She's very pro-feminist groups, very eloquent. I think you'll enjoy her appearance next week. So tonight we start with, I'm sitting in this class. I'm not Rick DiClemente. What do? I got all these books all around me. I got all these people telling me all this different stuff. And boy, you got to be careful what they tell you. Now remember, in 1971, just as I was meeting Marcia, I'm not going to mention the name. I got my chart read by a certain woman in the Morgantown area. And the woman didn't know what she was doing. And she said some things that were interesting. And I think she said some things to me that were true to this day. But she said a lot of things that were like curses. And she gave me a very negative viewpoint of my chart. So I carried that with me for 7 years. Until one day in 1978, when I started to study for myself. Neutral, study, ground zero. Let's study for myself. What do I see? And I never stopped. Just so happens that I'm that type of fanatic. But I learned very quickly that she should not be reading for people. Or certainly she should not be. She needed to put a governor on her lips because she was saying things that, you can really frighten the crap out of people. Astrologers have to be very careful what they say because your clients are very vulnerable. You're telling them what the planets say. And it comes across to them as chiseled in stone. So, number one, get your chart done by somebody good. The only ones I'm going to recommend are myself, Liza, Stephen Poplin, Ksenia Moore out of Australia. Those are the only ones I know that I trust at a deeper level. I've got some up and coming students that they're on their way, but they're not quite there yet. Okay. Why do you need your chart read? Well, you got a chart with all this stuff in it, and you have no way of translating it. You go to the internet, you read about Venus and Saturn, you read about Venus and Scorpio, Saturn and Scorpio, then it gives you all these harsh possibilities, and it scares the hell out of you. You don't have any way of counterbalancing it. You got to get your chart done by somebody really good and have it recorded. Now, so many people have these very naive ideas that I'm going to sit there and write. They think I'm going to write a 40-page document for them. I'm not doing that for anybody. Even if I have a grandchild, I'm not doing it for them. Plus, it doesn't work with writing. Plus, people wanted me to put it on tape recorder, give them a tape. I'm not doing that either. I need the person in front of me reading for them to have a dynamic dialogue with them. Because the chart is a breathing, changing entity, and I can't pretend to know it all. And when I get the person in front of me, I can sense things. It's dynamic. You got to get your chart done. Number one. Then, number two, when you start to read columns about your Mars in Scorpio or about your moon in Pisces, and you read these other articles on these flashing websites that look all cool, you got to be very, very careful. And I'm not just being a paranoid Capricorn here. You got to be very careful because it can really sound like a curse. I've told you many times that when I read for somebody, I can tell them 99 good things and one semi-warm thing, and they'll remember one awful thing 12 years later. They will. One god-awful thing that I said. And that's why I tape it. Play the tape back. Show me where I said that. So, it's just human nature. Life is tough, and we think that, my God, it's carved in stone somewhere that I'm going to get screwed somehow. That's how we act. Right, Claudia? Anyhow. When you start to read people, this is what's so good about reading Stephen Arroyo. He's the one I always push on you because he's very moderate. He calls a spade, but he gives you options. He says, this is probable, but this is possible, and this is possible, but he gives you the center of it. He gives you the central meaning of the archetypal meaning. Therefore, when you go left or right, you get a little more uptight, a little more relaxed with the principles that you're looking at. You have a central core to work with. If somebody's got Mars in Scorpio, this is somebody that's going to do what they want to do. They're passionate. They probably get in some trouble from being too hard-headed. Or going after what they want blindly and not looking at all the variables sometimes. I mean, that's the central core meaning of Mars and Scorpio. It can get really bad, and it may not be so bad. That's why you're going to have somebody that can read the chart to you. I have many people that get a reading, and they also tell me, read my chart to me, explain my chart to me, which is different than getting a reading. And I take each one and say, well, your sun is in Sag. This is the traditional meaning of it. Your moon is in Gemini. This is the traditional meaning. And as I go around through the pieces, just lightly touching on each piece, they can start to hear for themselves patterns. And that's why you're like the way you are. You got patterns. Now, I'm working very hard on a whole new level because I've just come completely full circle with astrology to the point where I almost have, in my mind, astrology's done. I'm not going to quit, but I've always known that my astrology is going to lead me towards a spiritual path, and it has, which is, in my case, the Course in Miracles, or what John's talking about tonight. The same theory coming from that book by Gary Renard called The Disappearance of the Universe. Highly recommended this book called The Disappearance of the Universe. And a lot of people have tried to pick up the course, and they can't do it. It's too cerebral. And a lot of people read The Disappearance of the Universe, they understand it in a different context, and then they go on to the course. So you can think about that. Now, in astrology, you're not going anywhere unless you know what Mercury in Virgo is, and how is Mercury in Virgo different than Mercury in Libra? And how is it different than Mercury in Gemini? And what is a Mercury? So, when we look at my sample chart tonight of Susan, here's Susan's chart. I'm going to go through a lot of things tonight, and I want to take my time doing it. All right. So we see in Susan's chart, you can, if you don't know how to do a chart, don't worry. Go to astro.com. You don't even have to become a member. I suggest that you do. It doesn't cost anything, and you can do all the charts you want. If you're not a member, you can do one chart at a time. If you are a member, you can save charts and put two charts together and get more into the advanced techniques. So here's Susan's chart. She's born as a Sagittarian. The computer, when you put in your birthday and you put in your birth time, hopefully, and your birth city, you'll get an accurate chart of what your final chart looks like. It never changes. Natal chart. So we know that in 1954, on December 10th, when she was born, the sun was in Sag, the moon was in Gemini, and you'll even need to start by looking up the symbols. There's some things you just got to learn. You got to learn the symbols for the planets and the signs. You have to learn those. I keep things to a minimal because I know that my students don't want to work. Most of them. Moon is in Gemini. The moon in Gemini means something totally different if the moon were in Cancer or if the moon were in Taurus. Now, one of the things you're going to come across right away is you're going to need to understand how fast the planets move. And if you will go to my previous video, there shall be on my previous video, if you go into YouTube and you type in Astrology Unplugged, episode 224, Astrology Unplugged 224 is all you need. You'll run across an entire Astrology Unplugged evening where I talked about how fast the planets move. The moon goes around the zodiac once a month, 28 hours per sign. The sun goes through a sign once a month, 30 days per sign. Mars goes around the zodiac once every 2 years. They all have their own speed. And you need to know that because ultimately what I'm trying to get you to is looking up your birth chart in time, getting better at translating your birth chart, but then taking your birth chart and putting planets on the outer side to see what planets are affecting you on any given date. So I found a sample chart done by Rick Levine, who's a very popular American astrologer, and I hope he doesn't mind me borrowing this just to show you. Here is a sample of Rick Levine. Okay. Here's a sample of him with a birth chart of somebody in the middle that never changes. Getting to understand that birth stamp, this never changes. You will spend your whole life trying to get a better and better understanding and translation of it. But then what he does in his own little computer, he puts Pluto on the outside, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus. So you may not realize this, but almost all the time, I never work with anything on the outside of a chart except these 4 planets. Very seldom do I use Eris. Very seldom do I use Jupiter. The reason why, these are the 4 troublemakers. These are the big ones that stir your life up good and bad. And that's why he found a nice way to show you a birth chart with 4 planets on the outside. So we can tell that this person, by reading astrology, this person's born around February 2nd, February 7th, something like that. This person had Pluto in Scorpio. So this person's born around, you have to know your speed of your planets. This person was born about 1985. That's when Pluto was at 4 Scorpio. I didn't look at a book. I just know how fast they move. So that may seem a bit much to you, which is why you need to buy yourself an ephemeris. You need to buy yourself an ephemeris. Here's an ephemeris, an example of one of the pages. An ephemeris is a whole entire book on where the planets were. The book is all numbers. And this book is from 1900 to 2000. And then the next one you can get 2000 to 2050. So I have 2 ephemerides. You know, a difference between mine and Cheryl's or Liza's is mine is calculated for noon, hers is calculated for midnight. So you can buy an ephemeris for noon, which I advise, or an ephemeris for midnight. The problem I have with an ephemeris for midnight is you're always looking at planetary placement of the day before, because all planetary placements on an ephemeris are for noon in England. You have to pick one spot on the Earth to show where the planets were, and the central focus of astrology on the Earth is Greenwich, England, which is downtown London. So in the noon ephemeris, this shows you exactly where the planets were on any given day at noon in England. And her ephemeris, any given day at midnight, which is 7 p.m. the night before. That's why I don't like to do the night before. So you're highly recommended to get Neil Michelson. He's the author of these. He's passed away now. He's the author of these programs that came up with these computers. He was not an astrologer. He was a mathematician. Neil Michelson with S-E-N at the end. Michelson, M-I-C-H-E-L-S-E-N. You can buy him anywhere, especially on Amazon. And the advantage of having a book like this is you turn the page, and there were many, many years before my software when every night in bed I'm looking at a book that's just numbers. Thought that's crazy. Just numbers, because I'm watching how fast the planets move. You can see how they were a month ago, a couple months ago. I wanted to know, when is Saturn? The other night I wanted to know, when is Saturn going to change and get out of Aquarius? When is Pluto going to go into Pisces? Or Pluto going to go into Aquarius and Saturn going to go into Pisces? And they're both next March. So I wanted to know, Pluto is in Capricorn. When is it going out? I wanted to know, Saturn's been sitting in Aquarius. When is it leaving? And they're both leaving around next spring. You just turn the page till you see it. And you can see here that this is open to my birth month, which is January of 52. But you can see here's Saturn in Libra. It's retrograde. Here's Mars in Scorpio, moving through Scorpio. Here's Mercury in Capricorn. Then it goes into Aquarius. Then it goes into Pisces. Here's Uranus going backward, retrograde, through the sign of Cancer. This is 1952. So you can turn to any month and see where the planets are. And it's a very advantageous book to have, and it's well worth the reference price. In my beginning days before computers, when you learned from me, you had to buy 3 books. You had to buy the Ephemeris, which told you where the planets are. You had to buy an atlas, a big, thick book on every city on the planet. So you learned where that city was, longitude, latitude, time changes, and you had to have a table of houses, which helped you to define where the houses are. You don't have to do it anymore if you got software. All right. So you need to know where your planets are. In this sample of this person's Mars and Venus were in Aries. This never changes. And the big deal about the birth time is we know the sun was setting. The moon was rising, the sun was setting. So we know the person's born about 6 p.m. It's not even listed here, the birth time, but we know that because the sun is setting. Sunset, midnight, sunrise, the moon is rising here. Sun is here if it's morning. You get the rising sign from this. You get the midheaven from this. This never changes. Then you look up, and when this person looked up this stuff, they looked up when Pluto was at 25 Capricorn, which was just a couple months ago. A couple months ago, Pluto was there, 25 Aquarius, Capricorn. This guy's still not following Eris. What's with him? Follow Eris. Eris needs to be followed. She's right here right now. She's right at the top of the chart. It's a big deal. Eris moves real slowly. You know Eris moves slowly because we know it's 540 years to go around the circle. We know that Eris is 120 years through the sign of Aries. It entered Aries in 1921. It's been sitting on top of this midheaven. So this person, this Aquarius with the moon in Leo, has that Eris sitting at the midheaven for a long time, many, many years, about 10 years, got another 10 years to go. So that helps you to understand what's pulling on me, what's pulling on me. Boy, it wasn't like that when I was little, when Eris was over here. But the past 10 years has been different, and you can start to understand it. So the main thing is you understand your natal chart, how it looks. You understand basically what the pieces are like, and you understand how to, when you go into Solar Fire or you go into astro.com, you can ask for any dates, transits to be put on the outside of your birth chart. What was it like when I was in college? Here's the birth chart. Here's 1969 on top of it. What was it like when I got married? Here's the birth chart. Here's 1983, the outer planets. You see that the inner planets don't do much by transit. So when you're comparing outer to inner, you only need the outer planets. The inner planets don't cause much except for little mood changes. And those are the ones you read about in a newspaper. The newspaper is always talking about Venus and Mars and fast-moving planets that give you a different mood for a couple of days, then it's gone. So the goal is to understand more and more about your birth chart, and then at any given time, wonder where those planets are when I had that car wreck. I wonder where it was when I had that foot operation. I wonder where it was when I met this beautiful woman. Then you start to see, because how do I put this? You're not going to continue to stay with astrology until you start to see the magic in it in your own life. It's not going to. I made the really bad mistake for years. I taught astrology for 32 years, and I made the really bad mistake of teaching them the basics. Where's the sun, and where's the moon, and what's this house mean, and what does this mean? And by the time they were done, I was watching my class go from 30 down to 20, down to 10, down to 4. And I finally realized these people, you got to give them something. You got to give them something. You can't just stay theoretical because you don't have that many clients that have that capacity. So right now when I teach, or a couple of years ago, I go third week, fourth week, and I start showing people's charts. I start putting their chart on the screen. Boy, then people stay in their seat. Oh, wow, he's telling me about my chart. Isn't that neat? Talk about my chart. When you make it personal, it makes a big difference. You know what? I had a hot idea the other day. You wait and see someone's going to do this. I thought about taking this is off the subject, but same theory, taking your thumbprint and blowing it up big, like a poster. How many people would buy a poster of their thumbprint? I bet you a lot of teenagers would, because you get to see your particular curves. They're yours. See, we're basically ego-centered individuals. We just are. And we not get to see mine. It's different than yours, but this is mine. Just how it is. And if you teach a class in thumbprints, they're out of there. So you want to get to know your chart, in time your husband's chart, your girlfriend's chart, etc. And after a while, to learn 2 or 3 charts is not that hard. I've got thousands in my head. Then you start to understand. What do you understand? Watch this. We're going to go back to this nice chart that I stole from him tonight. Okay. When I know that Pluto was just here a couple of months ago, and I know by memory that Pluto went into Capricorn on January 25th of 2008, that's when the age started. We know that Pluto entered Capricorn around here, 2008. So we know from here till there has been the last 15 years. That's what Pluto has done. And what it's done, it's shaken up any planet in this area. It's shaken up any planet opposite and at a right angle. So I'm constantly working with the fixed cross that's turning. Because when a planet is here, it's opposite what's here. It's at a right angle to what's here and what's here. So we know in 2008, Pluto hit Venus and Mars. Boom, boom. On the night of January 25th, 2008. Just by the fact that Pluto opened the door at 0 degrees cardinal, which is 0 degrees Capricorn, it started squaring the Venus and Mars. And I will guarantee you something started to happen to that person's emotional relationships. Because I see the whole cross moving at one time. That's not that hard to do. That's just one planet. Then you'll talk to them and you'll see they went through a divorce, they've gone through a marriage, something happened, something changed. Okay? So if you go to Astrology Unplugged, episode 224, you will get an education on how fast the planets move. You can get this in Wikipedia. You can go back to the chart and come and study this once again like this. Okay, so Pluto is anywhere from 13 to 30 years because it has this great elliptical orbit. It's not a circle, it's an ellipse. So Pluto spent 13 years in Sag, spends 30 years in Gemini. And the other one are a relative. 13 years in this area, 30 years going through Gemini. That's just the way it moves through the zodiac. Then when you move on to Neptune, Neptune is more equal. This circle is more regular. It's about, here's transiting Neptune. Neptune's about 15 years per sign. So he's been in this area for about 15 years. Okay. Then one you want to really watch is Saturn every 2.5 years, 2.5 years, 2.5 years, 2.5 years. Natal Saturn. Saturn's here, goes around when you're 28, comes around when you're 58, comes around when you're 84. So after a while, you're not really memorizing that much stuff. You're watching Pluto, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus. They're all different personalities. They all move through a sign at a certain speed. The outer planets, now listen, now all the outer planets, all of them beyond Mars, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, all the planets beyond Mars go forward for 7 months and go backward for 5. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Oh my God, I got 5 planets retrograde. Well, so does everybody every several years. You see, you don't know how to react to stuff. Oh my God, I got 4 planets retrograde. And you think, oh my God, Mercury retrograde's a pain in the ass. So what's going on with 4 of them? Nothing. It's normal. You have to know this stuff, and that's why you need an advanced astrologer to get you started. Again, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter. Forward for 7, backward for 5. Forward for 7, backward for 5. And if you have an ephemeris, you can see that they're all shifting at the same time. That's the advantage of having an ephemeris that's really worthwhile buying. Okay, so when you start to see that, boy, I don't have an astrologer, boy, I can't really understand this kind of stuff that Rick is doing. It's just too deep, it's too hard. Well, the least you can do is get your chart accurate, get it stored up on astro.com. You can buy software for your phone. You can get it for free. I have 2 programs. For my phone, I go to Alabe, A-L-A-B-E, Astrolabe, Alabe, ALABE.com, and there's a free program on the front page called Celeste. I use Celeste all the time, 10, 20 times a day, because I want to do a real fast chart. Where are the planets in? Boom. Where's Mars right now? Boom, boom. Don't have to bother my computer. It's on my phone, free. Celeste from Astrolabe. Now, if that's not good enough for you, because you can't save a chart, you can only look one at a time, or I think 2 at a time. You can go through to Google and buy Astro Gold. That's the name of it. I think it's Astro Gold. $25. Astro Gold. There's what, let's see if I can get it shown to you. I don't know. I guess I can't. Here you go. There's what Celeste looks like. So at any moment, I want to know where the planets are. Boom. Where were they in 1776? Boom. And you can have one chart on top of another, and that's it. That's with Celeste. With Astro Gold, it's $25, and it'll do a lot more. It'll put Save charts, save your whole family, put them all together, do composites a lot more. If that doesn't satisfy you, you go to astro.com on the internet. Store your record there. Store all the records you want privately because you're a member. Doesn't cost anything. And it will allow you to progress your charts. It will allow you to look at the current transits. It will allow you to do composite charts, all the basic stuff that you get. Then if you're really addicted and that's not satisfactory, then you got to put out about, I'm not sure, $375 for what I use is the solar fire. And you see me moving things all over the place because I need that stuff. And even then, I'm using maybe 15% of what solar fire will do. Okay. But for an experienced professional astrologer, you need something. There are others, something like solar fire because it's very accurate and it's pounded on by people all over the world. Okay, so the goal here, I wanted to show you something else. Let's see. So here comes John. John's going to join us. And John and I talk all the time. John is a good astrologer, and John is one of these people. He's just got this stuff memorized that Pluto's going to be in Capricorn. He tells you the days they're going to come out. Then it's going to go into Aquarius, and it's going to come back into Capricorn and go back. Well, John will tell you when it's going to go in the next sign, like 30 years later. He's just into this stuff. He likes to look at the large scale eras. He could tell you when Neptune's going to go into Capricorn, when it's coming out, etc. He's not worried so much about the inner planets. When you watch the outer stuff is when you see the big shifts to society. When I taught you early on, the personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. Those are your personality. They're very fast-moving planets. That's why we get so many individuals from them. Then the planets start slowing down. Well, they don't go slower. They just go through the zodiac slower because they've got so far to go. So don't confuse real speed with speed through the zodiac. Then you look at Jupiter and Saturn in the middle. They're intermediary. They're very important to watch. Jupiter's 1 year per sign, very accurate, 12 years around. Saturn, you got to keep your eye on Saturn because Saturn is the one that really governs your daily life. Did you get the job? Did you lose the job? Do you got money for rent? Oh, well, yeah, Mars. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. Remind me in a second. I'll get back to Mars. Now, when you watch the outer planets are the big periods in life. I went through this stage. I went through that stage. I know that's what I always tell you. Watch out for Mars. That's exactly right. Now, the outer planets you want to study because those are large periods in your life. Why has everything worked against me for the last 10 years? I had a reading yesterday for a guy. I just can't get a job the last 10 years. Why? I went back to January 08 and I saw when Pluto went into Capricorn, which is when his trouble started. See, you guys, this is happening to you all the time and you don't know it. It's happening to you. You guys know more than most people. Most people have no clue. Oh, but Mercury's retrograde and we got a blood moon. Who in the hell cares? When you got a Pluto return in the United States chart, like right now, you got a big deal like Russia trying to take the world. You could put things in perspective. You know what you're dealing with. And everybody else you're talking to doesn't. I love the people that reiterate an article that I wrote 20 years ago, and they come up upon it now and they write an article. Hey, I just figured this out. And I wrote about it 20 years ago. John told me about it 15 years ago. So when you're watching outer planets, you can see how the outer planets are going to bother each other, how Saturn is going to square Uranus in the sky. Two transiting planets are squaring each other like they are now, or Uranus is squaring Pluto like it was 5 years ago. It explains the vibes in the collective. Ooh, man, there's some vibe out there in the collective. It's the planets. And it ain't the stars. So quit talking about the stars. Astrology is not about the stars. It's about the planets. Some stars, like the sun, is involved. So other stars are minor. But astrology is largely about the 10, 11, 12 planets. Okay. So when I take a look at Susan's chart, now let's get into Susan here. Thank you for being my guinea pig. Now, Susan is going to fall into a certain family. She's going to fall into a certain subgeneration, and other generations not. For instance, a lot of people I see now, a lot of people have, I see Uranus and Pluto are right here that were born in the 1960s. 61 through 71, they all have Uranus and Pluto right here. She's not in that group, but that little subgrouping that was born during those 11 years have a certain generational meaning, a flavor to that group. Oh, my Healy's going off, so and that's my Healy to stop. Okay, Healy was working on me a little while there. Okay. When I talk about my parents' generation, Pluto was in Cancer. They had a Cancer feel. My generation, the people after the war, Pluto and Leos, with his tongue sticking out of the Rolling Stones' mouth. What about me? Look at me. Then the Pluto and Virgo yuppies were born. Then the Pluto and Libras with their pretty blue jeans were born. And each little subgrouping picks up the nature of the sign that went through it. So as Susan reads her chart, she can see some things that are generational, some things that are just personal to her. The personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. She belongs to the Pluto and Leo generation. The tail end of it started in 1940. Okay. Then the next generation came along, the Plutos and Virgos. So after a while, she gets to understand her chart. What does the chart mean? Through time, she will get different interpretations from what does Venus, Saturn mean. And then she'll learn about the fact that they were 1 degree apart. They're not 7 degrees apart. They're not 9 degrees apart. They're 1 degree apart. That means that the conjunction is very strong. So we see the Sun and Mercury 8 degrees apart. I don't think it's a coincidence that Susan and I talk so much, and my Mercury is at 1755. My Mercury is almost exactly where her Sun is. So even though we're quite different, when she talks, I listen to her because I have a rapport with her. Now, here's a little subgeneration. For that 1 year, 2 years, as Jupiter is moving 1 year per sign, and Uranus is 7 years per sign, for that 1 or 2 years, Jupiter and Uranus were together. So people born in 53, 54, 55 all have Jupiter, Uranus together, which is kind of an explosive, wild, very creative, extroverted energy. But And that whole group had them opposite Chiron. So what you had in this group is a lot of healers were being born during those years. So you start to see some qualities that came to you from the group or subgroup where you were in, and other qualities come to you personally for your own chart. So that just takes time, and you cannot know all this stuff by watching a few videos. You can't know all this stuff by listening to a few guys. Did you ever notice in the 6 years I've been on that I don't explore much? I have, in all this time, I have added Eris. Just before this show started, I added Chiron. Because I'm so busy with what I got. And astrologers, that's one thing about astrology is so weird. There's so many subroutes. There's so many trajectories with midpoints and with asteroids and with progressions and with minor progressions and all these harmonics. And there's just so much you can do. Now, number one, in my opinion, when someone goes far out on you, you're talking about your asteroids, or talking about some fixed star that's midway between your moon and your Venus, or they're talking about something far out. Okay, when they start doing that to you, usually they don't know how to do astrology. That's been my experience. Now, some of them can go do far out stuff and they know how to do astrology, and you're in trouble. In other words, they're accurate and you better listen to them. But even then, when you're listening to them, have a great big fat salt shaker with you. You got to have a lot of salt with you to sprinkle on when you're hearing stuff. If somebody starts coming across to you negative and curses, and that's what this means, and you're going to die when you're 81 and a half, and you're going to die because of a bulldozer, just stop listening to them. Just stop, because they don't know what they're saying, okay? When somebody starts to deliver expressions to you like, well, you know, you have Marsha, you have a very strong acting ability, and I can see you surrounded by actors or actresses. You might be on TV, or it might be here, it might be in the arts, and find out you could stay 30-some years on Broadway. But that didn't mean you had to. But I saw the qualities in your chart. You've got a twin who's got the same chart. He's not been on Broadway. You see the point? So reading a natal chart's touchy. It's very touchy. You have to kind of get the understanding of what the archetypal range is. So if you've got Venus and Mars in Gemini, you're not going to climb Mount Everest. You don't have the stick-to-itness to do it. You're just not going up Everest. If you have Venus and Mars in Gemini and you want to run a decathlon where you're doing 10 different things, you got a real good chance because you enjoy the variety. If you got Venus and Mars in Taurus, you probably aren't going to do the decathlon. Okay? So you can get a basic instinct from what the planets show you about somebody, and you can see the plus and minus. Now, a guy had yesterday, the central theme in his chart was Saturn opposite Neptune. And that means to me that in this past life, he believed it, didn't believe it, believe it, didn't believe it, believe it, believe it. I believe it, don't believe it, I believe it. That ping-ponging goes on. Now, I'm not exaggerating because you know what it's like when ping-ponging goes on in your own head. It does. And yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And you have to find a distraction to get out of it. Well, to me, it was the key to the chart. It opened up the whole entire reading, and it was accurate. Now, if that symbol of Saturn, Neptune, which is doubting, believing, doubting, believing, doubting, believing, what happens when the planets go over Saturn? What happens when the planets go over Neptune? Then you'll start to see why you canceled all your subscriptions to this Far Out magazine. And then when it gets over here, you reapply to all these same magazines. See, you're walking around thinking that these ideas are yours. It's very ego-centered. The ideas mostly are not yours. They're part of the collective speaking through you. And if we've learned anything in this class, we are connected. We are connected to something bigger out there, in here, whatever. We're connected to it in an integral, important, powerful, powerful way. And that's how you get to what got into Marcia. What the hell's come over John lately? What has come over Claudia? What's come over Claudia? We say the words, and we're exactly right. And it's a planet. And when we put the outer planets on top of the chart, we can say which one. Now, when I'm doing somebody and they tell me they wrecked their car and they broke their shoulder and they gave me the date and I put the transiting planets over the natal chart and I don't see anything, or my mama died and I don't see anything, that's what flips you out. And that's why another group of astrologers quit. It's not always a natal chart. It's the progressed chart. It's the harmonic chart, whether they want to agree with me or not. The harmonics show a lot of stuff. So usually when I'm reading for somebody, I'm seeing their story. And a lot of times their story will urge me to get more and more finesse in that birth chart. A lot of times I just get, it's not in the birth chart. And I go looking through the 12th harmonic. I go looking through the 6th harmonic. And I go, aha. And I start to see other things. That stuff's more advanced. That takes time. But for now, what you got to do, you got to get an understanding. When I told you about Arroyo's handbook, what does Jupiter and Aries people look like? How are they different from Jupiter and Taurus people? How are they different from Jupiter and Aquarius people? It's only 1 year for each one. Marcia, good night. Good night, honey. Okay. So if we take a look back at Susan's chart, Susan has that rarity of, I do see a lot of Saturn, Venus in people. I see this a lot. Why? I'm not sure, but I very seldom see Saturn and Venus together in Scorpio. Sometimes they're over here. Sometimes they're over here. Okay, her personal planets. Sun is in Sag, Moon is in Gemini, Mars is in Pisces, Venus is in Scorpio, Mercury is in Sag. Well, look how mutable she is. She got 4 mutable signs. She has 4 mutable planets out of 5. 5 personal planets: Sun, Mercury, Mars, Moon. They're all mutable signs. Sagittarius, Gemini, Pisces. This means she's very mutable. She's very flexible. She's very changeable, even to the point of maybe too much, too scattered. Who knows? Scattering is a real possibility in this chart, in which case the Saturn really saves the day. Saturn doesn't put up with scattering. Saturn wants things solid, consistent, and there's her art symbol. She's an artist. She's an art teacher, and here's the art right next to Saturn. So this gives her some glue, some stick-to-itness to be able to teach in a school system for X amount of years, when these other planets would have her changing schools every 3 years. So in time, you start to learn more and more about it. More importantly, you start to learn, boy, there's this dominating T-square in this chart. Why is this dominating black square there, black triangle there? Jupiter and Uranus opposite Chiron, T-squared to Neptune. Well, there aren't any others. There is an opposition of Pluto to Mars. Look how wide it is. It's 26 and 4. So it's out of sign, and it's almost 10 degrees. So Pluto Mars is in effect, but it's not that strong because the orb is wide, and there is a square from Mars up to Mercury. But this T-square is monumental because this T-square is all the gas gets sent through that chute. This is the outlet. This big fight that's going on with her, and all my readings with her are centered upon the fight, the essence that's left over from the 12th harmonic from the past lives is this fight here. Now, this fight is dominant, but it's not that personal because everybody from 1952 to 1989 is born with Uranus opposite Chiron. This is when we started to see the birth of all these healers. Okay? But nevertheless, we see the base of her T-square comes across from there, but it's not just a ping pong ball with her, it has an outlet through Neptune. Therefore, the Neptune is really, really powerful. Not only is Neptune powerful, and it tells you that she's very Piscean, but we want to know what happened when planets went over there. And I could blow your mind right now, finding out when Pluto went over there, what happened when Uranus went over there. It would be major, major stories. These are your sensitive points. So as you start to get better at this, and John and I sit down and we talk a lot. You know, John knows approximately what month or what year he's got a great big transit coming. I know about when my big ones are coming. I could feel them coming. I could feel Mars on my calf muscle tonight. I've had a very sore thigh muscle from a muscle pull, and I looked and Mars is at 5, my moon is at 6. And that's what I was telling John before I get to that. When I tell you to always watch Mars, that's a different category because here's what happens with that. Here's why you got to watch Mars. All right, let's go back to this chart. All right, in this person's chart, when Neptune finally gets to the Venus and Mars, okay, since they're so close to the doorway, right at 1 degree, 2 degrees, the second that Neptune goes into 0 degrees of Aries, it's going to start affecting this Venus and Mars. And it's going to go on for a couple of years as Neptune goes back and forth. Well, that is the era. That is what's going to happen to the person. What's going to happen to the person? What's going to happen to the person? Well, it's obvious that these two planets are somewhat selfish. Aries planets are about me. What can I do? I'm going to go get what I want. Go get what I want. That's Aries planets. Do my thing. Well, not when Neptune goes over it. And when Neptune goes over it, here's the difference. In the old days, Neptune out there was going over your Venus, Mars. Ha! It's not since Arroyo. Neptune going over to Venus, Mars. It's my Neptune going over my Venus, Mars. That's what changed astrology in the 70s. It became humanistic astrology. So I started to see my own Neptune going on my own Venus, Mars. And what that means is my spiritual planet, my spiritual center of my soul is my Neptune. It's moving, and it's changing. because of its dynamics with the rest of the collective. When my spiritual center goes over my two greedy, selfish planets, I start to feel, and I start saying to my friends, you know what? I'm just not cool anymore with certain things. I've really been kind of greedy. I've been kind of selfish. It's all been me oriented all the time. And I'll start saying these words to people as if they came from me, which they did, but they really are symbolized coming from Neptune. Now, as Neptune sits on these planets during those couple of years, what I'm asking the client about, are you going through a softening? Are you fighting less? Are you getting more refined? The things that you see with Neptune. And that's where I can gauge how well the client's doing with that transit. Now, transiting Mars. Now, during those couple of years, while Neptune's in this area, remember, Mars goes around every 2 years. So Mars will be here, Mars will be here, Mars will be here, Mars will be here, and Mars will be there. So while Neptune's sitting there, in the dialogue of Neptune going over Venus, Mars is all one of softening. Just lay back. Come on, Uma. And Neptune is wanting to become more selfless, et cetera, all of a sudden Mars comes by and gets involved, which is why I tell you to keep your eye on Mars. For a couple of days, you start going, oh, what have I been doing the last few years? This is crazy. Give me my stuff. Then the Mars voice gets loud, and you start to feel the fever. You start to feel your temperature go up. And for a couple of days, give me that thing. I didn't mean to give that to you. Give that thing back to me. Then Mars passes by. You change your mind again. So Mars is the instigator. That's why you got to watch Mars. He instigates what's already set in motion, along with the sun and the moon and the lunations, full moons, new moons, eclipses. Those are the triggers: full moons, new moons, eclipses, and Mars transits. When they pile up on top of some other planet sitting on some other, that's like I told you, when a planet's sitting by you, like Pluto being near you, is like somebody parked some big panel truck outside your window with lots of dynamite in it. And Pluto's sitting there just bubbling and brum, 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 brum. And then you see a guy go down your street with all these fireworks, and you're really hoping he doesn't come on your street. That's the Mars transit. That's really what we're doing. We're watching 4 outer planets. We're watching 10, 11, 12 inner natal planets, and that's it. But when you do it for a long time, you get better and better at looking at the natal chart quickly, saying, here's the story, not here or there. The story is not here. It looks like it, but it's not. Here's why: the story is there. I have a gift in that area. So then the other stuff becomes watching the faster moving planets. You can tell when something's going to be there. So if I go to Susan's chart once again, what's the big deal with Susan now? What's coming up on Susan? If I were reading her tonight, all right, Pluto is at 28 degrees. It's at the very end. It's at the very end of Capricorn. Okay. It recently went over her Chiron opposite Uranus, Jupiter. And what did she do? She sold everything and she went on the road. Chiron opposite Jupiter, Uranus. If that's not a traveling healer, painter, whatever, vagabond, I don't know what is. And when Pluto got there, she went. And if she had not gone, she would have been in trouble. Now, let me rephrase that. If she really wanted to go and repressed it, she would have been in very big trouble. But if she wanted to go and she went back and forth and finally did go, then as soon as she went, everything's going her way. everything just starts going her way. Let me give you this book. Let me give you this connection to this committee and this group and this guys. They're hanging out in this town. We'll go see them. And all the doors start opening for her. So we've seen what Pluto's doing. Now, why is Pluto doing it in her chart? Pluto's not doing it so she can see her Chevrolet and see the USA. What's Pluto doing on these two planets? This is the main part of her chart. Uma? Tell him. I don't know what you saw. What is Pluto doing? These two planets are the center. Remember, astrology is about one thing. It's about your attitude towards God. Say what you want. This is the axis of the zodiac that's about God and service to God and service to others. And we know hers is strong because it has a T-square to Neptune. So even when these two stop fighting, the answer is always to go to Neptune. Neptune's always about getting involved emotionally and stuff and letting it transcend me. Watching myself transform by getting involved in these things. So even though she appears on the surface that she's traveling and she's talking and this is neat and that's neat, that's not what's going on. She's much deeper than that. This trip of hers is a soul transformation trip. Period. Now, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, and I don't want to know, and I don't care, because I'll talk with her, and we'll start getting out of her words on what the trip is, okay? Now, meanwhile, the other planets are moving. So we see Pluto's been doing that. And another thing, Susan, when Pluto gets past the point 26, 27, 29, we see right now Pluto's at 29, right opposite your ruling planet. Your ruler is Jupiter. So Pluto is at 28 and a half. Your Jupiter is 29. So Pluto is getting within inches of being opposite your ruling planet, Jupiter in Cancer. Because Jupiter rules Sagittarians. So your ruling planet is about to get hit by Pluto, which is why I'm talking about it tonight. Now, when you look and you see 26, 27, 29, 27, we see a rather tight T-square. So what she has decided to do in this lifetime is to continue her healing, etc., continue doing this work. Remember, this is a house of service, and she's always had this short service, this, I don't know what you call this. Let me get this. All right. This is her escape valve, the Neptune. So we know that she's on a spiritual quest. This looks like her and two dogs are riding around the country. She is on a spiritual quest. Doesn't mean she's out to save the world, but something like that's going on. Something's going on. So we stop there and let it be. We know it's major because Pluto's 29, her ruling planet's 29. So we come back to the house. What house does Jupiter rule in your chart? It rules your 11th house. So that's all about expanding, reaching out, and enlisting other groups, joining other travel groups, which is what you just finished telling me about. All these travel groups that you've been touching base with throughout the whole country. Now, what you do with something like that, let it sit. Go on to the other planets because we're looking for recurring themes. Where's Neptune? Neptune is at 24 Pisces. So Neptune is right here 24. There's nothing here. There's nothing 24 here. There's nothing at a right angle. But we do see when Neptune gets to 28, Neptune will be squaring that moon. Okay? Neptune will be squaring that moon. Now, when Neptune squares the moon, almost always, you're going to park that van next to a body of water and you're going to stay there. An ocean, a lake, a river. Almost always when it hits your moon, because Neptune is symbolic of spiritual input. Spiritual input. And when the moon's involved, and Neptune, they're both have to do with spirit, which is represented by bodies of water. So don't be surprised. This doesn't mean you have to, but don't be surprised if during that couple of year period, you kind of cool it and you don't feel like moving so much. You want to stay put so that you can input more spirituality. Okay? And these things, at this point in life, these are things that you say, I can see this coming down the road, Rick. I can see it, but it's a couple of years. You're telling me how far the planet's away. So it is. You can feel it. So we see that number one, you got off your butt and you moved. That really, really helped you. Now you see why I've told so many people this past 2 years. You want to do it? Do it. You want to do that? Yeah, do it. Susan going to do it? Yeah, just do it. I don't care what the details are. Good, just do it. Because moving is so much healthier than staying put. It just is. Unless you're crazy, doing something insane. So you getting the idea, Susan? Okay. Now, put your mic on for a moment. Now, you may not see the deeper Piscean meaning that I do, but in a couple of years, you're going to look back at this time and you're going to see it as a major, major spiritual turning point. And a lot of times, spiritual turning points happen when you get out of your home, because homes keep us stuck.
Right.
Geography can really keep us stuck.
Right.
And I'm sure you're traveling and you flapping those Sagittarian wings. I'm sure it's felt very natural to you.
Right.
Other signs, Capricorns, will drive me nuts. I'm going to go park it. I don't want to go on the road all the time. Let me sit somewhere. Tauruses, let me sit somewhere. Okay? Not with the moon in Gemini, sun and Sag.
Right. I did feel very stuck.
Yeah, you're eating it up. Eating it up. And what's important about that is your spirit was stuck, and now your spirit is moving again. Now we got to go way deeper into the harmonics to get into other stuff. Yesterday, I'm reading for this guy, and he's got like quadruple Virgo in him. And I'm telling him, he's 59 years old, and he's, I'm 59, I'm 59. And he was really starting to calm down after a while. I said to him, the 12th harmonic in your chart can represent, and I'm going to go into this in great detail some night, your shackles. Your shackles around your ankle are not from mommy and daddy and sick brother. They're from your past lifetime. There's your mama. Okay? I said, now you wait and see, because we're at the end of his reading. I said, I have not looked at this, but we're at the end of your reading, and I'll bet you that you're at the point now where you're going to people start to dissolve their shackles. They start to chip away at them. They start to screw with them. They start to hammer them. They start to remove the shackles, especially when they're in their 60s. He was 59. I turned the page, I opened the 12th harmonic. Neptune was sitting right on his ascendant. In his 12th harmonic, Neptune was on his ascendant. What solution do you want for a guy with 5 planets in Virgo other than Neptune? Neptune was sitting on his ascendant, which means what? It means that inside, if he's attentive, if he's not too far gone with identification with the workaholic,
Right.
if he's not too far gone, Neptune's starting to dissolve those shackles. He's starting to say inside, I don't have to work all that time. I don't have to do 10 widgets tomorrow because I did 9 today. I don't have to do that. I can leave this sink full of dishes. But you could see, I could tell I was approaching him with stuff he'd never heard of. So I'm having him come back in 6 months, but having him take this video and learn to listen to it, because the shift is taking place that he thinks that in this lifetime, with everything fixed and detailed and all that in order, that he's going to fix stuff. And he's not going to. He's going to ruin it. But it's going to take him time to adjust. So, once again, going back to your chart, let's go look at Uranus. Okay. Uranus now is at 14 Taurus. 14 Taurus, Susan, which means very soon it's going to be at 16. Okay, right now it's almost at 15, right? So it's going to hit your Venus, then it's going to hit your Saturn by opposition. Let me give you the dates. So in solar fire, you go to this program and you ask the computer, it's pre-programmed to go tell me when these things are going to happen. It's almost done. There, it's done. So we're looking to see Uranus. Here's Uranus. It's going to oppose Saturn 3 times. Uranus will oppose Saturn. You're not seeing this, are you?
No.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can get that on your screen.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. So your Uranus is going to hit it 3 times Saturn. It's going to be opposite Saturn. Uranus opposite Saturn on May 30th for its first pass, then retrograde when it turns red. On November 25th, you want to write this down, and then March 19th. Now, May 30, November 25th, and March 19th of next year. Well, March next year this is opposite Saturn now, okay?
Right.
Remember, next spring is when I told you that Pluto is leaving Capricorn and Saturn is leaving Aquarius, right? When you're having Uranus hit your Saturn. So we know that next spring will be a very major turning point for you. Now, the other thing that I skipped over is it's hitting your Venus first. Uranus is opposite your Venus 3 times. Uranus is opposite your Venus May the 10th. January 1st, February 12th. Now, on May 10th, when it opposes your Venus, what do you think is going to happen for an artist? Your art's going to change. And when Uranus hits your Venus, you get more far out, you get more experimental, you try wilder colors, wilder methods. You just start risking, trying stuff. Hello? Make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you see how much we could tell by just looking at the outer 4 planets going around. We only looked at 3 of them. We only looked at Pluto, Neptune, Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you understand about the natal story that each planet represents, the more you can understand what the transit's going to do. For example, all right.
Anything that would show the intersection between art and spirituality would be really
Oh, it's a very good question. Okay, it's a very good question. First of all, we have to understand that Venus is a spiritual planet.
Okay.
Okay, it's just personal. We found out that Neptune is squaring the moon, even though Neptune's a couple degrees away. It's already starting with your moon.
Right.
Now, what do you think Neptune is saying to a moon in Gemini? What do you think it's saying to it?
Pursue more spiritual things.
Exactly. But you see, in this case, it's a little more to it than that. Gemini is about let's treat things lightly. Let's not go into stuff too deep.
Right.
Okay? And Neptune doesn't know what that means. Neptune is about giving it all up and dissolving into a sea of nothingness. So, in actuality, what we're going to see is your moon in Gemini is not going to be so happy with being on the surface anymore. It's going to want to quiet down, go into deeper things. At the same time, the Uranus is coming up behind, getting ready to hit Venus. Okay?
Right.
Oh, both of these have a lot to do with water. You're going to start seeing in your art. I know you've been doing a lot of portraits. You're going to start doing a lot of artistic work with water. What have you been doing? You've been doing a lot of spiritual art of people's beings in their past or beings on the other side.
Right.
Okay, that's the Neptune also. So you mix it all together. So what we've learned as I wrap things up here is astrology is a continuing job of mixing things together, mixing the seventh house, mixing Mars, mixing Neptune, mixing Saturn going away, mixing here comes Pluto. You're constantly mixing these archetypal brushes. That's what they are. They're archetypal brushes. Now, there's a lot more to it, as you know. You know, I've done it 44 years. You can see how complex it can get. When you get better at it, you don't dwell on little things. You learn the stories over here or the stories over here, etc. Now we didn't even mention here that this entire chart is swinging from Mars. There's the bucket pattern from Mars. So anytime something hits fourth degree of Pisces, where's Mars now? Where's Mars now? 5 degrees Pisces.
Oh.
Mars has just passed over your Mars. So you've had a Mars return the last couple of days. So you could have gotten feverish, hotter temperature. You could have gotten irritated, maybe fight with somebody, maybe even a sense of refreshment, refreshing yourself, refreshing your energies. Okay, but the point of tonight has been get better by looking in the books, because the books will help you get a basis of what does Venus next to Saturn mean? What does Pluto opposite Mars mean? And when you read these things, be very careful because they can really scare you. So my motto is don't be scared unless you talk to me. And if I tell you to be scared, then you need to be scared. No, I'm not going to do it because I've seen too much. I've seen too much. Most people are going to be just fine with their chart the way it is. It's just a matter of getting a broader understanding. Yes, dear.
So then Mars just hit my Mars, which is a loose opposition to Pluto.
Right.
So it's triggering that Pluto-Mars opposition,
Right.
which classically is supposed to mean episodes of violence.
Well, it can be episodes of violence. It can be, but it's usually episodes of hard-headedness or be bullish or hard-fisted, be too pushy, things like that. Violence itself is a little more far out. Let me explain something to you. Mars coming over your Mars, which sits opposite Pluto, is one story that can't really be looked at because the secondary ruler of Scorpio is Mars. So it's like painting a red wall red. You don't notice it that much. For instance, if you had Mars opposite Neptune, and Neptune's always trying to cool that Mars off, trying to cool it off. And Mars comes by, it's Mars, then you tell that Neptune, yeah, I don't want to hear you anymore. You see? You have to look at what's involved here. But we see in your chart, what have we learned tonight? We've learned that you're on a very big, what's it called? A spiritual mission. You go out in the woods and
Yeah.
Vision quest.
You're on a big time vision quest. And the fact that the planets came by and allowed it and got you off your butt and got you moving is a very good sign that you're not stuck, you're not rotting in place, that you are going with it and you're going with spirit. And I'm telling you, what all this really means is your attitude towards God. Now, you can debate me if you want to, but eventually you're going to look back at this time and you're going to see this was a major turning point in your attitude and approach towards whatever you call God. We see big things coming to your moon, which is with Neptune square. We see big things coming to your Venus with the Uranus hitting it and your Saturn. So that's going to be huge because your Venus Saturn is not only the glue that holds the chart together, it's also the most rigid part in you, and it's going to start loosening up like the rest of the chart is. So most people, by the time they get to be 10 or 15, they have learned to deal with their problems in their chart somehow. Doesn't mean that they've learned the best way, but they've learned to deal with it because they've had to survive.
Right.
So you folks who are listening on YouTube, whatever, get somebody good to give you a good sound reading of your chart. I really highly don't recommend you get some automatic procedure that gives you an automatic printout. It's not going to do it. You need somebody, a human who's really good that can look into the major contradictions and give you a healthy translation. Then through time, you can start watching, become a member of astro.com and start watching when the planets are coming. And you can watch, and you can even buy calendars. Then Mars is going to hit Venus on this date. Neptune will hit this moon on this date. There's all kind of things you can do. So don't be discouraged. Now, remember, next week is the wonderful Kathy Pagano. She'll be joining us via Zoom out of Rhode Island. She will be talking about dreams, etc., and all that, but she'll be really focusing on the rise of the divine feminine. If you look back through my indices, you'll see she's been with us before. She's talked about exactly that. So she's very good. So brush up on your homework about Eris and rising divine feminine and shift with the feminines, the end of men like me and John, me and both these Johns. We got to get the hell out of the way, let these women come in and fix everything. Let them fix everything that we've messed up. Night, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Rick.
so much.
Thanks,
See you next
everybody.
week. Good luck, you and the doggies. Love y'all. Love y'all. See you
Love
next
you
week.
all.
Delby says night.
Night.